realistically, climbing is or can be the same thing that it was when you started and you fell in love with climbing. Um, and that's what I'm trying to preserve, you know.
All right, Jason Kehl, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we don't have Tim today. Tim, you're missed. But he did send in a question, although I'm new to actually putting the question on air. So we'll do our best, Tim. I might have to just read it aloud for you. But yeah, Jason, great to have you on, man.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for contacting me. I did listen to the Jared Roth one yesterday, and it was really good. I enjoyed it.
Well, Jared sent us some questions for you. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
Jared is, yeah, he had some really good questions.
Nice.
Yeah, just like Jared, Jason, you've been climbing for a long time, man, for like 30 plus years. And I was trying to figure out how to intro you. And then I realized something pretty wild. I'm going to argue that you may have impacted more climbers' lives than maybe anyone in the industry. And I'm going to explain that.
Okay.
Most people have probably climbed on an FA of yours, but maybe they're not outdoor climbers. Maybe they only climb indoors. Well, they might have climbed on a wall you designed because you've designed a lot of them, been part of a lot of gym designs. But if they haven't done that, then they definitely have climbed on one of the shapes that you've shaped. They've grabbed one of the grips you've shaped, and that's
Hmm.
just cool, man. You really impact every level of the climbing world, and I just want to say thank you for that. And I can't wait to dive into all those different things that you've done.
Nice. Well, yeah, thanks a lot. That's a pretty crazy statement. But yeah, I mean, I do a
But
lot of stuff, you know. I do a lot of stuff and videos too. People may see videos or whatever, but yeah, it's cool.
yeah.
Climbing's cool like that.
Oh yeah, I forgot about all of those dosages you've done and all of the media you've put out. Oh yeah, just that side too. You're definitely famous for having an artistic style all your own. You're definitely yeah. I want to say thank you for being not boring, for having a personality and standing out. So yeah, as anyone who has listened to this show knows, I love evolution, dude. I think I don't know. There's even a
Awesome.
comment made that there should be a drinking game where if I say evolution, yeah, you should drink. But it's basically making fun of me for saying that boulder too much because
Uh-huh.
I just think it was really cool, and you really hit my radar when you did that FA, and I saw the video, and I just thought it'd be fun to start out by hearing about that whole process of that beautiful boulder, man, and doing it for the first time.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's definitely my most memorable boulder of everything I've done. Um, but basically, I went to Bishop. I think that was early 2001 or something, 2001, 2002. And, you know, when I first saw the wall, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Um, and then, you know, the line that was there at the time was Sharma's line that went to the lip. And some friends were trying it and it looked cool. And I just wasn't, you know, feeling the, you know, go to the lip and drop. I was like, well, why don't we just at least try and top it out, you know, try and see if, you know, we can do it. Um, which led, you know, me to wrapping down it, checking it out. Basically, you know, no one was really trying it. And the way I was going, you know, this kind of straight out the left a bit, um, it was hard up there, you know, it was like hard at the lip. So like usually with some harder high balls, you're doing some hard climbing and then maybe the top's not as bad, but this one was like, you know, serious up high. So that was really interesting for me, just trying to push that aspect of like high ball bouldering and having things be harder, taller, you know, just more grand and like just you see it and you're like, wow, this is like so inspiring.
Yeah,
Um,
anyone who has driven up to the Buttermilks knows what
mhm.
evolution is. It is the most striking boulder I think I may have ever seen in my life. And you said that it it's hard after the lip, right? So it's like V10 to the lip, and then you tacked on some hard climbing after there. And yeah, it's very different from high balls where you just get to do some V2 romp of glory. And yeah, it's tall, but let's face it, no one's going to come off up there. And I guess, was there anything like that before? Like, had you been highballing before and not encountered something difficult? Like, was it kind of the first of its kind to really be that difficult, that high off the deck?
I think so. I mean, other stuff is definitely tall and hard, but like it seemed like the next level, at the time. Um, but I mean, more or less, like I just wanted to do it because it needed to be done. Like, it was such a shame that such a beautiful wall was just like a hang and drop. Like it just, I don't know, it just needed to be finished. Um, and kind of I was trying it with some friends too, like, the guy I was traveling with, Mike Aldridge, if you remember hearing that name. He was trying it too, and he was actually trying the one that kind of goes more right, which I guess they're calling Evolution Direct. He was like really close, and I was really close, and he ended up pulling his like hamstring on another unrelated problem. Um, but this is kind of a fun fact. Like if he would have done the first ascent, he had wanted to call it Wu Tang Killer Bees on the Swarm as the name of the climb. So I kind of lucked out that I got to do the first ascent. Um, and actually, it was kind of the name Evolution came about because someone mistook what I was trying to say. I was like, oh, maybe we should call it evolution because it's kind of evolution of highball bouldering. Actually, they misheard it and thought I said evolution, which ended up being like such a better name, just because it's kind of a play on words and everything. Um, so yeah, that was kind of interesting how that came about, and like I think it really changed. I don't know. I love that names can like give you a feeling. When you hear about a name of a climb and a climb like that, it's like I think it's a very fitting name.
Yeah, that video of you doing the first ascent really had that vibe. Like, I don't know why, but the part that always stuck out or stood out in my head was when you're like in a cave with a heater, and it's fucking cold and miserable. And
Mhm.
then there's also this scene where you're like, oh, I'm just done. Like your finger, you probably had like no skin. And
Mhm.
Bishop is beautiful, but often you probably want to climb on that boulder right when the sun goes down, because like it's in the sun, and
It's
it can just be
blazing. Yeah.
it's a it, and that whole experience is kind of savage. It's kind of, Bishop will beat you up, or especially the
Yeah.
buttermilks. Your skin, it's cold, it's dry, it's tall, and I just, that name plus that video. Yeah, actually, I'm curious. You talked about your buddy Mike. What end up be working on the line that ended up being the direct. And Jared, actually, his one of his questions was, how do you feel about people mainly doing the direct? Like, to be honest, dude, I did the direct for whatever reason. I still kind of credit
Mhm.
you to being the guy that unlocked that boulder. But does that,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that?
No, I was trying both also. We just wanted to top out the boulder. So I was going this way, going that way. I definitely got up there a couple times. At the time, the right version was Chaucy, like up high, like pulling the actual bulge. That rock was actually really Chaucy. I'm sure it cleaned up over time. Uh, but that was one of the reasons why I was like, oh no, let's just go left. Um, I do have issues with the names, actually. First of all, evolution to the lip is not a climb. It is not a name of a climb. The word evolution did not exist until it was topped out. So whenever I see people like, oh, evolution to the lip, like you, it's not a climb, like I understand people, whatever they call it, what they call it, but like, uh, I mean, whatever it should be called, whatever Sharma called his version, like it's just such an oxymoron to hear the word evolution to the lip. Actually, I have this low ball
That's
I did in Hueco that I'm calling evolution to the lift. Uh, but that, and then the right one got called evolution direct, which also I think is kind of strange, uh, because the line I did kind of, you stick that big move out left and then you go directly up. Whereas the one that goes right, you traverse that lip for like 3 or 4 moves to get out right to a spot where you can go up. Um, so yeah, if I had a choice, I would call that evolution right, and then evolution to the lip would not be a problem.
that's interesting. Yeah, you really do traverse over maybe like 6 feet. I mean, they're jugs,
Yeah,
but you kind of cruise way over,
yeah.
and yeah, it's interesting how rarely your evolution gets done. I'm just gonna say
Mhm.
evolution because that's the one. Uh, and it's because it's freaking hard, man. I remember
Yeah.
rumors thinking that people thought it broke because it just, in fact, I'm not gonna. I guess I can call him out because he's so good. I saw the day I did the direct version. Daniel Woods was on evolution, and he
Mhm.
hopped off that bit quite a few times, and he went on to do the process like the next day, so he was in shape.
Mhm.
And Daniel may not be the boldest climber, but he knows how to pull down hard
For sure.
on those crimps, and it just
For
is a
sure.
testament to how difficult that line is. And when I looked on 8A, I only see like 5, 10 people doing it, and they're all like
Mhm.
V15 climbers. It's just,
Mhm.
I think that's why it doesn't get done, because it's just freaking hard, man. I really want to go back and do it because I want another excuse to get on top of that boulder, because
Nice. Mhm.
I don't know about Rostaman or Lucid. Those one might be a little tough for an old guy like me.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like it's definitely, they're very different. And the right one's even taller, so it's like, I guess in a way more dangerous. Um, but yeah. Yeah,
So
and the one thing I did remember listening to Jared's podcast was the crows. He was talking about these crows. And I definitely remember that. And I even have like a little entry in my journal about like thinking that these crows were like a warning, you know, because you're like soloing up the back to get on top and you hear these crows and it's like kind of terrifying.
yeah, oh man, yeah, that's so cool though. That just, no wonder it's such a good memory for you. It's just total next level pushing into the unknown. I just, it's so cool to hear that, man. I just want to dig in a little bit more to that behind the scenes, because it was such a different era. uh Hearing that you wrapped down it and cleaned it, like, did you ever do rope rehearsal? Like, was it based, I mean, yeah, what do you think of ground up versus rope rehearsal on this stuff? Or did you ever pull on while on a rope?
Yeah, like I'm all about, just checking things out, cleaning to make sure it's safe. Um, following like generations like John Sherman, where they were like no inspection, ground up. Uh, that was definitely like, I've hung out with him a bit, but that was always, a spot where we hit heads, bumped heads, because I was like, that makes no sense. Like common sense would tell you like you're gonna get hurt. Uh, so I'm all about inspection, cleaning, making sure everything's safe. But then as far as the moves, I definitely tried moves, but actually I've never done anything in my entire climbing career. I've never sent anything on top rope before I've done it. I use a gree, I wrap down and I try individual moves or sections. Like I don't want to get something wired and then be like, "Oh, look, I did it without a rope." I just want to figure it out. I want to have access to figuring it out with the rope, and then I want to try and send it from the ground. Um,
Hmm.
and I think for evolution, I definitely tried those moves, um, but a lot of times I would clean and then just try it from the ground. Um, but I think at a certain point, I know on that, and then afterwards I went to Yosemite and did the first boulder ascent of After Midnight. Uh, on that I was like, okay, I'd been getting to like the last move so many times that I was like, okay, I just need to get up there and do the move, practice the move, and then like try and do it.
I love how just forward thinking you are on this stuff where you're hearing John Sherman about, not cleaning. It's just, I can't stand when prior generations have this holdover of stuff that basically is a limiting belief. And, it, we talked about maybe mentioning cargo nets and, using that to protect climbs. I just want to say how much I love that ability to evolve, to use the word of the day,
Mm-hmm.
along with climbing and say like, this makes sense. Like I'd like to not break my legs, or I'd like to, clean this thing off so that other people don't rip off a flake and break their legs. And just,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really cool that you've been in the sport for so long and that you both, that you continue to push the ideas of what's appropriate or what is possible instead of kind of getting stuck behind in these just these tropes from the past, like, then we wouldn't even
Mm-hmm.
have sport climbing, or hell, we wouldn't even have bouldering, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really put a lot of like emphasis on the ascent and the style of the ascent, you know. That's very important to me. I think without it, we're just messing around. But at the same time, I like to keep the climbing itself so simple, bouldering, for instance, that you don't need a lot of rules. You don't need to be like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's the simplest form, is pulling on at the base, on an undercling or whatever, and like, pulling the bulge and topping out. You're standing up, you're like physically like, you know, summiting the boulder. Um, but yeah, I think that style, like I don't know, it's very important in climbing, but there's also so many different gray areas. We're talking about the nets. Um, you can really do anything you want. Like originally, I had talked to Sharma about it, and he had this idea of putting a bunch of boxes under evolution, like a stuntman would, like just tons of cardboard boxes, and then pitching off the lip and landing in these cardboard boxes. It's not pads; it's some kind of shock absorbing, substance. Um, so it's weird, and the same thing with the nets. It's like, oh wait, could it be done without a net? Maybe it could be done without a net. Is it safer? Definitely. Is it still bouldering? It still feels like bouldering. I don't have a harness on, you know. I'm not like top roping something and saying I bouldered it. Um, so yeah, I'm all about like, yeah, like messing with that technology and like, I don't know, the whole concept of bouldering, it's always like people, it's really helpful if your friend can give you a power spot, you know. You can do so much. You can do so much with a power spot. But on high balls, you can't get a power spot. So why not use the rope as the same, thing to kind of work the moves? Um, totally makes sense to
Yeah.
me.
Well, and when you bring in this new technology and it maybe unlocks the ability to do new lines, you don't cover up the choice of styles that is available for self-expression. Like we were talking to Carlo and Connor Herson, and Carlo put up this thing called Empath, like a 14D or
Mm,
15A, and then Connor came and did it on, on gear, and it's not like that. It's not like Carlo was like, "Hey, I put bolts in there. How dare you not clip them?" It was just like, "Oh, cool, Connor, you chose to do it this way. Good for you. Like that.
mm-hmm.
That's cool. Like that was interesting." And yeah,
Yeah.
I like I like that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of like the whole situation with the fly. When I did the fly, Dave Graham did this 2-bolt sport route, and I was like, I think it can be done in a better style, which to me is bouldering. Um, and it's still the same climb. It's just different. I just don't like the ropes. I don't like all this stuff on me. I don't like being told I have to stop at a certain point. Like, um, I don't know. I just love the simplicity of bouldering. It feels like less of a game and less of a sport to me. Like, sports having so many rules and games. Um, yeah, I just love that it's so simple.
So these FAs are okay. I guess first bouldering ascent of the fly of After Midnight
Uh-huh.
and the FA of Evolution. You're well known for your videos and your style and your artistic expression, and it makes me wonder what you look for in boulders. Like when you, because you develop a lot too, and there's a theme there in those three climbs, and they're beautiful, tall, and hard, but I know that you also, do FAs of all kinds, and I guess, what do you think about the aesthetics of lines? Like, what are you really attracted to? What is kind of the pinnacle of a good boulder for you?
Um, well, yeah, I do all kinds, like you're saying. Like, I love doing easy problems, like new problems. Basically, I'm looking for a cool shape, an awesome looking boulder. Um, like a lot of times the grade secondary, like I'm never out there being like, oh, I need to find a V14. I need to find a hard line. It's more like, oh, this is a sick feature, let's see if we can climb it. And then maybe it's hard, maybe it's not, but like drawn to the line. In Hueco, I love like the crazy sculpted rock and like beautiful arêtes, like these like crazy features that feel like indoor holds almost, which is amazing to see outside if you're used to climbing on granite or something like that. These crazy like snails or whatever, these awesome pinches. Um, and then I do like a little spice. I think a little spice is nice for just keeping you like real and like you're like, okay, like I'm not in the gym. I'm like I'm rock climbing, which is dangerous. I could hurt myself. But I'm focused, so it's not a big deal. But I think that's cool. Like not always. I love to go out and do stuff that's like a low ball roof that I can just throw one pad under. But when I'm looking for like nice lines, king lines, like lines that are like at the top of my list, um, definitely something that you're just, as soon as you see it, you're inspired, or maybe as soon as you see it, you get that like empty feeling in your stomach because you're like a little scared about how tall it is or the landing. Uh, I love getting that feeling at the first time seeing the climb, and then I love breaking that down to the very end where you're not afraid of that anymore and you just understand everything about it, and super cool process.
I love that that thing you said where you see a line for the first time, it just kind of, yeah, you have a little feeling in your stomach. It kind of just takes your breath
Hmm.
away. You're a little unsure. It's interesting because you kept saying line. It made me think of Bloodline, and I remember when I saw the picture of Bloodline, which is, I don't know how hard it, a moderate in Waco, and it's just got
Hmm.
those cool tufas. And I remember seeing a picture of you doing it, or a picture of it, and I was just like, oh, I have to go do that. Like that is the
Yeah.
coolest feature I've ever seen. Just so drawn to it. But I also uh, there's something about coming around the corner, seeing something new, and actually, it. I didn't realize you had spent much time in Squamish, and then I saw you did the first bouldering ascent of Strata Squampton, and I just wanted to hear about some of your experiences in Squamish because I think that's the land of both extreme
Mm.
low balls and extreme high balls. And the
Yeah.
when you talked about that feeling where you come around the corner, the one of the ones I really remember is seeing Teenage Lobotomy. And I went there the night before I did it, and I walked around the corner. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go do that tomorrow. That's kind of tall. That's a little spicy.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. That's a great place because this one you're talking about straight out of Squampton. Um, a friend of mine, Jeremy Smith, took me up there to look at it because he was like, "Oh, I know you like highballs. Like this thing is awesome. It should be a boulder problem. I don't know why it got bolted or whatever." And he took me up there, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's pretty big, and you come at it from the bottom of the hill, so you're like looking up at it. Uh, and I was definitely not psyched. I was like, "What?" Like, This looks crazy. This looks super high, sloping landing. Um, Definitely was like at first glance like, wow, I don't know if I want to do this. Like just because not only that, but the last move's the crux, and we were like pitching off the lip when we were trying it. Um, so yeah, it's interesting, but then you wrap down it, and then you understand like where you are. Maybe your feet aren't really as high as you thought they were going to be when you're up on the wall. Um, Things look scary, especially at first. So I think that's also what's cool because I know that when I put up these things that the person's first experience seeing it, they're gonna get that feeling. They're gonna be like, oh wow, like that's intense. So that's cool. It's like, a feeling you can share.
Did you say Jeremy Meeks? Did I hear that right?
No, Jeremy Smith.
Oh, okay, Jeremy Smith. My mistake. I was going to say Jeremy Meeks. He's a longtime climber. He's like the best spotter ever. So I was like, at least you'd have him on your team.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, what a beautiful climb. Yeah, I think that's interesting to hear about this idea of doing something for the first time, and then you kind of are packaging this experience almost up for the next person to come along. And it just it made me think about the media that you put out, the developing you do, and I just this is kind of a tangent, but I think it's still in your wheelhouse. Is what do you think? What's the connection between art and expression and sharing it? Like, if you climbed Sreha Swampton in the forest and no one saw you, did it actually happen? Or, what's
Hmm.
what's your connection between FAs and setting up that experience for the next person, or even, yeah, the media you put out, and just that how does sharing come into that equation?
Uh, it's interesting because there's like the whole spectrum of like problems. I definitely put up stuff like, it's a classic V10 that I know everyone is going to be psyched on next season. Um, and I definitely think about that. I'm like, oh wow, this is gonna like I'm psyched to tell my friends about this. They're gonna love trying this. Um, very accessible climb. And then on the other hand, there's this stuff that I find that I'm like, when I think about that sharing aspect of it, I'm like, wow, no one is ever going to come out here and do this because it's like so extreme. Uh, like I'm trying this thing I found recently, and it's pretty tall. It's kind of a hike, and I'm like, I'm putting this up, and it's like very much for me selfish. Um, I'm sure in the future someone's going to get psyched and try it, but it's definitely not that like V10 that's at ground level that everyone's going to go do next season. Um, but at the same time, like I still want to do it, and I still like it means the same to me as the other climbs, um, or it means even more, I guess, because it's more challenging, more difficult. Um, but I know no one's really gonna like experience that, so it's kind of strange, like it's kind of like I did this thing and I just leave it out there.
Yeah, I guess one of the reasons I ask is it's my experience with evolution. I think I drove up there in 2004, 2003 or something, and I'm not sure if there was a guidebook, or if it was marginal. I didn't know about it, and I had asked someone. I drive up and I see this Grandpa Peabody thing, and I asked someone like, what is that? Has anyone climbed this? And they say, oh, Jason did. It's called Evolution, and before I camp down for the night, I go to the Looney Bean, some crappy coffee shop, and look it up, and see your video, and it was like intense and scary, and it's just interesting because I find that had I not encountered the boulder like that and seen that video, I'm not so sure it would have held the meaning that it did for me. And so it's just funny
Hmm.
how there's almost more to that experience than just the rock. Like you crafted a whole experience for generations, even though it was just climbing, but
Hmm.
it wasn't just climbing. It's more than that. And I just thought that was really cool. I appreciate that.
Nice, thanks. Yeah, it's so strange with that video because I I kind of made that video with like my friends, like Obi helped a lot with that video, Obi Carry On, and Mike Call, like, edited the video and shot some of the stuff. but like I paid him to make the video because I wanted this video piece that I was going to use in my slideshows. Um, and it's so strange because I never posted the video on YouTube, which I actually should at some point. But it just randomly showed up on YouTube. Like I don't even know the guy who posted the video, but it's this random guy posted the video. It's on YouTube. It's been there since like whenever, like almost like right after I did it, I guess. But it's so strange because it was never put out there. It was just I had it for my slideshows, and um, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I'm sure like uh, it's very similar to back in the day. You know, you'd go to an area and you'd have the guidebook. Like the first time I went to Hueco, or like one of the first times I went to Hueco, like we wanted to go and get on all the stuff in the guidebook that was had photos. You know, so there was like a cool photo of someone doing like between the sheets. You know, so we wanted to go to between the sheets and we wanted to do that move that was in the photo because it looked cool. You know, and I think a lot of times the video especially nowadays. But like, you know, that would inspire people to go check it out. And yeah, if that wasn't there, you definitely wouldn't have the same experience. Um, and I don't know, like a lot of times two people will post a video of something that had been done a long time ago, and no one's ever seen the video, and then that problem becomes popular again because you know now there's a video of it.
Yeah, I sometimes wax esoteric about what a test piece is, and I would argue that there's an element of history behind it. It's not just the climbing, it's not just the line. There's something about, and media
Mhm.
drives a big role behind that. You know, and even and now we have video, but it could be, you know, the story. I mean, Midnight Lightning has that iconic story.
Mhm.
I gotta share one thing that I clipped from the YouTube, which was put up by some random dude. And I did recognize that. I was like, who is this person who put up this YouTube video of evolution? But there was a hilarious comment that I don't know. I don't know if you ever look at the comments of this, but
Yeah.
the comment from 13 years ago is, I don't get this. Where did the downward looking camera angles come from? Is there a
Uh-huh.
much simpler way to get to the top of this rock that a camera crew can easily gain access by this route? And it's like, it cracks me up because it makes perfect sense. You're like, dude, that's a really reasonable question. If you just stumble, I just don't understand how that dude stumbled across this video and then clearly was not a boulder, but I was like, damn, that's actually a pretty good point. I know what you're getting after, but it just cracked me up. So just had to share that.
No, I've read the comments. There's some pretty crazy ones for sure. It's a good time.
Well, I'm gonna close the chapter on evolution. If you were playing along with the drinking game, you're hammered. And you still put out content, and you kind of recently started this series, and you're calling it Real Climbing. And I've been following along, and I just kind of wanted to hear why you called it "quote unquote" real climbing, and why you started this series, and just what you're creating with it.
Okay, well, I guess I started it because my previous series that I was doing on YouTube was called World of Illusions, and it was kind of, you know, maybe once, maybe twice a year, I was putting out a video about new stuff I was doing in Waco. Um, and yeah, I just felt like it was kind of time for a change. I've been living here in El Paso for like 5 or 6 years now. Um, so my life has changed a lot. I've had 2 kids. Um, a lot has changed.
Congrats,
Um,
congrats. Yeah.
Thanks. But yeah, still finding the same joy in climbing. Um, is I don't know. I think that's one of my specialties. You know, like maybe I'm not the strongest or whatever, but like I know how to enjoy climbing and I know why I love climbing, and I try to do that every time I go outside. Um, and I try to just share that with people through the real climbing episodes, and I want to do them more consistently. Um, and I want to talk a little bit more about some behind the scenes stuff, or at least what's going on in my head, when I'm trying to do stuff. Um, and I don't know. I feel like real climbing is, I don't know. It's kind of taboo to say, "Oh, this is real climbing," because I'm not trying to say that what anyone else is doing isn't real climbing, because a lot of people do say that to indoor climbers or people doing the parkour stuff. They're like, oh, that's not real climbing. Um, and true that it isn't real climbing from my definition of climbing, but it's also climbing, which is why in general climbing is amazing. Um, people talking about, oh, climbing's changed, it's so different now, but like realistically, climbing is or can be the same thing that it was when you started and you fell in love with climbing. Um, and that's what I'm trying to preserve. As a joke, I almost wanted to do the first episode about just I would be sitting in the forest just staring at a rock for a half an hour, because a lot of times I feel like that's what I'm really doing all day. Um, just trying
It's
moves and just being out there all day, just trying moves repeatedly. Like it's it's not really that exciting. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I just go ahead.
I was just gonna say that all what you're saying is really congruent with what you're putting out. There's just this authenticity in the videos that is different than uh, different than most media out there right now, and it really is actually what climbing is like. And it's interesting because I like the what would you say, like the articulation, the saying aloud, what's going on in your head when you're battling through
Mhm.
a crux or like a move where you're just like, dude, I keep falling on the same move over and over again, and just making aloud what that feeling really is like. And it's, I mean, the truth is what you're saying. There's a lot of sitting there. There's a lot of falling. There's a lot of inner dialogue, and it it was refreshing as someone who I gotta say, I also appreciate the flashy media because it does propel me to go literally travel the world. It's like, oh, I saw
Mhm.
this one picture of Ethan on this climb in Mallorca, and I was just like, I'm fucking going there and doing that climb. Like that is
Mhm.
what I'm doing. And seeing you on Evolution. And it's just it's I always think that the internet is good at making extremes. So you have you know short, flashy, and then I also appreciate the kind of longer form, honest, authentic things, aka a podcast, like we're doing.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I love that. I just love seeing that side, and it is real. It's the real.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was saying, like my love for climbing. Like when I started climbing, I was going out before school to some random boulders, spending all morning brushing them, fixing the landings, whatever. Uh, I just did the same thing like yesterday, you know? Um, so it's really cool how, even though climbing has changed, you can still, find what you love in climbing, because there's just so many aspects of climbing. Um, a lot of people, don't like the crowds so much these days. Well, you can go to an area where there's no people. You just have to hike a little farther.
Yeah, God, it always blows my mind if I accidentally end up in Bishop on the Thanksgiving Day weekend. I just am horrified. And then if I go on Tuesday, there's like not a soul
Mm,
there, and it's wonderful.
yeah.
It's something that makes me think of that I just find really interesting is you have this love of climbing, and you really lean into that enjoyment. You said you're like, I may not be the strongest climber, but I can have more fun than anyone else. But what's really interesting, Jason, is that you are one of the strongest climbers, and it kind of makes me think of Chris Sharma a little bit too, where we harp on this a lot in the podcast, where people just think, oh, I just need to hang 6 mil edges 20 times and that will make me a great climber. And
Hmm.
there's something to training. I'm not going to say that hanging on a hangboard doesn't make your fingers stronger, but when we look in the past at the legends of our sport, the people doing amazing things that we're talking about today, that's not really how they get there. I find it interesting that we talked a little bit about training, or do you do any structured training, or because you really have sent really hard in the past. And I don't know, can you speak to how you progressed to do those amazing lines, and whether or not you were grade chasing or not, you still brought that out of yourself physically, and just how is that related to the joy that you bring to climbing?
Um, I think it's partially because of the obsession. You just fall in love with the line. Um, sure, I've done some training off and on, and like you're saying, oh, I want to do like a hang on this certain edge. Like, yes, that does make you stronger, but like if you're gonna send the project, like go to the project. Like I went to Rumney to do the fly, and I just camped out there. I was like, I'm not leaving until I do it. Uh, and it's just that kind of mentality where you're like obsessed with something. As I like to say, to mutate your body. You just keep throwing yourself at something, and like, sure, you're gonna feel stronger if you're campusing and everything, but like if you're going to the project and you're working on the project, a lot of times, I don't know, don't feel like that I'm not strong enough. I feel like I just don't know the right beta, or I just don't know the subtleties of the hold. Like you find one thumb catch, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I can just do this now. Um, so I think that on-site research, whatever you want to call it, like just throwing yourself at the climb, like that's more important than doing the pull-ups or the campusing. And I think, yeah, the people that are out there doing stuff are, they go there and they become obsessed with it, and they don't stop until they do it.
Yeah, you mentioned that instead of training on a hangboard to do the first move on the fly, you just would do pull-ups on the start holds to really mutate your body for that specific move. And I thought that was just, it's obvious, but I think the reason why I like it is it gets to the core of what we're doing as climbers. Like it's like, what's it about? Is it climbing, or is it about preparing for climbing and just leaning into that actual experience, showing up, being inspired by a line, and then I think that's hilarious. And then freaking pitching a tent until you do it, just saying, okay, this is this is what I'm here for.
Hmm.
And I that obsession has sure paid off. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's strange because like it's you also adding so much pressure on yourself, by giving yourself these like goals or these projects. And it'd be easy like, oh, I just don't want to go today, because I don't know, mentally you're like, wow, it just seems, more than I can handle. Uh, it's just, keep going and just doing it. Um, it's very easy to like mentally just back out. And I think, strength and climbing and mental climbing, like mental climbing as far as on the spot, like having the desire to push through, and then there's the mental aspect of your day-to-day life, where like, hey, like maybe I shouldn't have a drink tonight because I want to send my project or whatever. But I think mentally, staying psyched when you're not at the project about the project, is kind of a big deal too.
Well, on that try hard note, Tim was asking about your about power screams. You're somewhat
Mm.
infamous for yelling. Although I don't know, I actually don't think you're actually totally infamous for yelling. I think that anyone who's really out there trying hard, and I guess that his question is, does that come out of you on purpose? Like, are you yelling your way up the boulder, or is that just a sign that you're trying hard, or how does the yelling play into uh, your deep try hard on these climbs?
Okay, well, it's kind of interesting. Like on purpose, no, I wouldn't say I do it on purpose, but when it comes out, I think it helps. And I kind of come from a karate background where you were kind of taught to do that, when you punch or when you kick. Um, and there's some thought that, screaming or whatever, like gives you like that much more, so much a little more percentage of power. Um, and I think just, being okay with yourself to just release that, not being, I think a lot of people are self-conscious, and especially in a gym scenario, you don't want to look like a meathead screaming around the wall. Um, but yeah, I think that really helps, and just being able to like let that out, like as you're climbing, um, even like, some sigh of relief upon the summit, like a lot of people, like they do their hardest climb and they just kind of stand there on top, and you're like, wow, like they have no emotion. Like, so I feel like I'm very good at just letting the emotion out on the wall, uh, where some people do it after they hit the ground, they start screaming, they get upset. So it's cool to direct that while you're climbing to maybe give you like a little edge, when you're like going for that crux.
Yeah, I never choose to yell, and when it comes out of me, it's always like this moment where I go, "Oh, I'm here. I'm trying hard." And I really want to emphasize what you said, where it's people often don't want to, how I put this, like they don't want to look bad. They don't want to yell and then fall, or they don't want to
And
call
fall,
attention
yeah.
to themselves. Yeah, but I remember there was a listener question a while ago, or I don't even know if maybe I was just texting with this guy, and he just was stuck at a grade, and he was really afraid of falling too. And my my recommendation to him was to just actually focus on the movement and to really try hard and not be embarrassed, just to really show up and be willing to say, like, I'm just going to try hard here. And I think that's a prerequisite for being great. I mean, it's basically what you're talking about how you've done so well, is you get obsessed with lines and you commit yourself to it, and you're that kind of, by saying that you want to do something, you're opening yourself up to failure, right? You're like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to put my all out there. And I just think that's so cool that, that comes through in that physical sense. You're literally, you know, yelling while trying your hardest. And it's like, yeah, if you're not willing to put it all out there, then how can you expect to get the best of yourself? And yeah, so Tim, sorry I couldn't play that clip. I didn't have a cool Tim voice. Maybe I'll be able to edit it in or something. But
Mhm.
yeah, I love your yells, and it makes me feel better that when they come out of me too, it's just involuntary, and I don't need to force it too much.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of times with hard climbing, it's like, are you willing to try past that point of that awkwardness? Like you're saying, like it's gonna get ugly. Like it's gonna get ugly if you want to send. It's not gonna be perfect. It's not, like a lot of times, like the people that send are the ones that like should be falling, but for some reason something happens and they don't. Um, I find that with so much hard climbing, it's like you could easily just let go or give up at that point. Like it'd be so easy just to give up or not to try as hard as you need to try. A lot of times, like you're like, oh, I can do the move. I've done the move several times. Now I'll just do the move. No, you need to like throw yourself at it and like thrutch, like, yeah, just like release everything.
That's so cool. Um, All right, Jason, I'm going to do a complete 180 and dive into the indoor climbing world. When you told me that, I knew you were a prolific shaper and that you've been doing it for a long time. And I do want to talk about shaping, uh, but I kind of wanted to learn more about gym design, wall design. I'm imagining you stepping around the corner and seeing Straya Swampton yelling as you stick the final jug, way off the deck. And it's so interesting to me that you have this pure love of climbing and being out there doing the thing, and that you also have somehow shaped that love into a world of climbing that seems kind of different. Like, what do you do when it comes to wall design? And just, can you give us some behind the scenes of how you have taken that love that we've just been talking about for the last hour and morphed it into a very wood and plastic, and I'm going to say almost a sterile environment. Not that I don't love gyms. I absolutely love gyms.
Hmm.
But it's a different, I still think that's real climbing, but it's a different kind of real climbing than we were just describing.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's all climbing. um, but yeah, I don't know. I think that when I'm outside, I'm looking for the beautiful line. I'm looking for a line that you see and you're like, oh, what's that? Like you were saying, you're like you want to know what it is. Like I remember the first time I went climbing, it was like a bunch of vertical walls, and then there was this big roof. Like this was outside, and I just wanted to know what was that roof and has anyone done it? Like it looks just so stunning. Um, so I think just because I've been looking for that like most of my life, that now trying to translate that into like indoor climbing and wooden walls, I just kind of want to give the climber like that same experience. You walk into the gym and you see a cool feature and you want to climb it. Um, and I mean, I love designing bouldering more than route climbing because I'm a boulderer, but um, yeah, I just love that feeling of, designing something that's inside, but it feels like it could be outside. It's like it has a very boulder feel to it. Like, like there's an arête or whatever, a nice bulge. Um, a lot of, I mean, it's cool that, a lot of things are simple walls, but at the same time, um, it's nice to throw in some cool features, throughout a gym that people like just are drawn to, or features, that like you see it and you instantly have a name for it, because it's so
Yeah.
striking.
I'll never forget the first time I walked into the Rocknasium, which is a tiny little gym in Davis, California in like 93. And they had a roof. And this thing is like 20 feet tall or 20. It's like, I don't even know if you
Hmm.
need a rope for this place. And it had a roof. And actually, not to beat this term to death, but I actually considered that real climbing. Like lead climbing on the roof to me seemed real. And I was so drawn to it. And yeah, it's just kind of cool to hear that going into the creation. Are you able to say some of the gyms that you've assisted with the design? Or is that like NDA stuff that you can kind of
No,
mention
no,
some of
that's
the gyms
cool.
just in case people
Yeah,
listening, might be like,
no,
that's my
that's
gym.
cool.
Jason made that gym.
Yeah, well, all the Earth Trek gyms, that are now movement gyms. So all those gyms, which those are some of the biggest ones I've done. The Inglewood gym, um,
That's a
and then
big gym, by the way. A
yeah,
big
that's
gym.
like it's an indoor crag actually. It's got several different crags inside. No, that gym's crazy. But more recently, the high altitude fitness in Truckee, California.
Plus one to that. Very
Method,
cool. I go there.
nice.
Method. Okay.
Method in New Jersey. And I just finished a gym in New Haven, Connecticut. Um, but yeah, kind of just freelance designing. People come to me who want to build a wall and they have a space or they're looking for a space. And I just, I don't know. I think I have a lot to offer to like the indoor climbing world, uh, with my knowledge, how long I've been in the sport. So yeah, just trying to get involved with more people.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that we talked about with Jared, where when I talked to Jared about shaping, he didn't have anything bad to say about any shapers, just that he was trying to explain how deep he went into climbing. He's like, no, I really went deep into climbing, and it lets me shape in a certain way that is just authentic from someone who really dedicated their life to it. It sounds like I know you do the same with shaping, but before we leave the gym design, just because I don't know, it's just something that I think is really interesting that a lot of people don't know about really at all. Like, can you walk me through the just like those very beginning steps? Like someone comes to you and says, I'm building a gym here. It has this much square footage. It's
Hmm.
this tall. Like, how do you decide, okay, we need this much vertical terrain, this much overhanging terrain. We need like one cool feature that's really attractive in the center of the gym, or like, how do you start picking apart that problem and making something that ends up being as massive as that Inglewood movement or Earth Treks, whatever it's called?
Well, I think the most difficult aspect of the gym design is the layout, like a lot of times you're dealing with buildings that have a lot of columns or whatever. There's not a lot of space for the wall. So I think figuring out the layout and, a lot of times you can only get a steep area, in a certain spot. Like a lot of gyms, there's only like one good spot to put the steep wall really because of whatever reason. Um, so yeah, that's super important. But yeah, like having a good layout throughout the gym, making sure all the angles, are represented throughout the gym and like more of the stuff that's going to be more popular. Um, I guess that just depends on the clientele really, but a, lo- a lot of gyms are very similar, like you'll have like your slab, your vertical, and like, maybe vertical to 25 is like your most popular, and then you'll have some steeper stuff. But yeah, I love to put in the features. I love the arrets, like a cool bulge or something like that. Like I just, I like steep climbing also personally. So I think the trend is getting a little away from that, but I love steep climbing and, um, having a steep wall that's like cool to climb on, but it's going to stay cool for like a really long time because, it's like a classic angle or whatever.
I love steep climbing. One of my big complaints about gyms putting in steep climbing, I mean, now they do it better, but it was always like this, hey, we're going to put a roof on, but by the way, there's something that you could just stem on right next to you.
Hmm.
And so it's like never actually steep. Like I just hate when you see these cool looking roofs and then you actually try to set on them or climb them and you get one move where you're actually in the steep and then either you're bailing out with like
Hmm.
a sharp arete that just you're going to heel hook every. You're just like, okay, this is never going to be actually steep. So, yeah, more steep climbing. I understand the slab. It used to be I felt like there was not enough slab, and you'd have all these newcomers coming in, and they're like, hey, we need slab, but I don't know. Then this whole comp climbing world has done more slab climbing. I don't know. I just want bigger, uninterrupted slab, bigger, uninterrupted roofs. But it sounds like sometimes there's some constraints that a layman like me isn't aware of when you design that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely helps that I've been route setting for like almost as long as I've been climbing. Um, just being out there on the walls all the time, and like when I did all the earth treks, I was actually going out and setting for all the opening sets. So I was like getting to climb on like most of the angles and like check everything out, and yeah, it's cool. It's a cool experience.
So you've been doing gym design, you've been setting, but you also have been shaping. Like I think when I thought of you personally, other than your climbing, to me you were a shaper. And I think I mentioned this during our pre-interview, or whatever you want to call it, when we were chatting before.
Hmm.
Something I found really interesting is that you were one of the first people to, or at least in my eyes, my eyes, I felt like you embraced indoor climbing for what it could be rather than just trying to mimic the outdoors. And there's always these famous okay, like the boss from Pusher is, it's font, right? It's like it's a big sloper with ripples. It's you can see where some inspiration was from. And I'm not saying you've never made those shapes, but I felt like you were willing to say, like, do I have to mimic font, or can I just start with a blank slate and say what's possible here? Like we have, you know, uh, all we have is plywood and bolts. Like let's see what we can do. Is do you remember some of your early days in shaping? Am I getting that right? Where I think about you pushing that frontier, or am I off base there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm always trying to think out of the box, as far as design or whatever. But yeah, like, and it's funny you say like the granite and the font and stuff, because like when I was first shaping for Pusher, um, I had done some stuff they liked, and then they were kind of giving me, some I could do whatever I want basically. The guy who was running it at the time, uh, Mike, you could tell he was like, "Oh yeah, we love your stuff. Just do whatever you want. Like let's do something really big." Um, but then I was like experimenting, with the textures. Like I had done this set of like 5 holds, and instead of it being a granite hold, it was granite and font mixed together, or it was like limestone and granite. So I was like taking like two styles that they had already done and like put them into one hold. Um, so that was definitely experimental because it was like, oh, you just do the limestone hole, you don't do limestone font or whatever. But then that was early on, and then once I got involved with So Ill, they were like even more. They were like, yeah, let's do something crazy, whatever you want. Like, let's really try to push the envelope of like what people are doing with holds. Um, which like, yeah, we were putting stuff inside the holds, like we were putting like these tubing inside the holds, and like um, I even did some that were like dual text crystals that that there was no texture. Um, so it was definitely experimental, and I don't know if I would have done as much of it if So Ill wasn't like, oh yeah, like let's just do this, let's get people like this weird stuff, like the light bulbs or whatever. I didn't do those, but like stuff like that, where you go in and you're like, wow, like you never imagine climbing on something like that.
That's so cool. Yeah, Jason, I definitely wouldn't, or I would, the words I would use to describe you would definitely be out of the box thinker. And it's so cool to see, that coming through and people, encouraging that. And it makes me wonder, what do you see coming down the pipeline? I mean, I was going to say in shaping, but just because you're so integrate into wall design and setting as well. You know, what do you think might be around the corner? What are just interesting areas that you think are fun to see where they're going to go?
Hmm, I don't know. I feel like everyone kind of trends in like one direction. Like, like dual text is huge right now. Um, I was just at the Wix conference and they had some holds there, and like they were all dual text. Uh, a lot of fiberglass. Um, so I don't really know. I feel like it kind of has a mind of its own, and it definitely, trends kind of go back and forth through competitions and stuff like that also. Um, but I would like to see more experimentation, like more experimentation with like the materials, having holds that like flex on purpose or whatever. Um, I think I don't know. I'm kind of like doing a bunch of I do some random stuff on the side, um, but I have a bunch of ideas for just like bizarre holds that aren't your that don't fit into your standard climbing hold plastic with texture. Um, like just weird things. Like I have this one that's like a bunch of strings basically that hang out and you like grab it. It looks almost like my dread. You would like grab like a fistful of strings, or if it was a slab climb, you would just grab like one tiny thread, that would be holding you on the wall. Um, just random stuff like that. But I think those type of experiments, that once people start doing them, it kind of just opens the doors for everyone to just do different stuff or experiment with different stuff.
I love that. It's funny because it sounds crazy to me, and maybe I'm just not as visionary. I'm like, I don't know if I want to grab that, but then I will say that whole dual text or no text, wherever it is. I'm trying to imagine someone telling me 10 years ago, "Hey, what if we made climbing holds that were slippery?" I mean, like, no, don't do that. Like I use chalk. I don't climb in 90-degree wet. I don't want it to be slippery. And clearly, I didn't know what I was talking about. Although I guess when I think about dual techs and when they hit the scene, it seemed to me like it was trying to encourage you to maybe, it's like, here's an undercling and you can only use it as an undercling. You can't stand on top of it. But it's funny how that morphed into, well, actually, maybe you can stand on top of it. What if we even use no text as a, or dual text as, like, that's the part that you have to use? And I'm still not the biggest fan, I'm not gonna lie. But maybe that's just because I'm old. I don't get it. But
Yeah, I mean, anything's
yeah.
possible, really. Like I made this hole that was a sandbag. It was like a canvas sack that had sand in it, and when you grab it, like you could like squeeze it a bit. Um, so yeah, just like bizarre stuff like that, or a squishy hold. Like my kids have all these squishy toys. You squeeze it and it's
That's really
squishy
cool.
and it's got balls inside. Like, just whatever. Like anything's possible.
What a trip. Just while we're on the subject of dual techs and the evolution of climbing, I know that you used to compete a long time ago. Do you pay attention to the World Cups? Have you, what do you think of competition climbing now? Did you watch the Olympics? I know it's not exactly, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It doesn't seem like that would be something you'd be tuning into, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think about comp climbing and where it's going or where it's gone in the last, gosh,
Um,
decades?
yeah. I mean, I know I watched some stuff for sure. I definitely have found myself watching a World Cup and like wasted like 2 hours of my life, you know, like I should have been doing something else. So I'm really enjoying. I've seen a couple like super cuts people are doing on YouTube, where it's like a 25-minute recap of like just the finals. Um, so I definitely check that stuff out. I don't know. It seems all a little too similar to me. There's like always the same paddle move. Like it just seems very similar. Um, it'd be cool to see a comp where there wasn't like a dyno paddle in the finals or something. Um, I don't know. I feel like these moves get hot and then everyone uses them all the time. Um, but it's definitely different than it was, you know, 5, 10 years ago. But it's also cool to watch, you know. It's interesting to watch. Um, and it's cool because like we were saying with the holds, you can do all that, because it's not outdoor climbing, it's not rock climbing. Um, but there's a lot of
Yep.
stuff that like doesn't make doesn't make sense to me, but that's also because it's leaning more towards sports or games, like as an outdoor climber, I never understand when people finish a problem by putting two fingers on a hold. Like, I don't understand what that is. Like, what like doesn't mean anything to me. Um, I would rather them just like go all out to like the top of the wall, like a jug on the top of the wall. Um,
Yep.
so when
Yeah,
there's
that's
those
got to be one
weird
of the
games, yeah, it's so strange.
that's got to be one of the biggest complaints that I have for comp climbing is that it's hard for me to understand, even as a experienced climber, like who's winning or what the goal
Mm,
is exactly. Like it's just kind of like what. Oh, yeah, the two fingers. Like, but wait, is the tape on the hold or on the volume? Because if it's on the volume, can they just touch that? But well,
mm-hmm,
I'll say the the total opposite ends of the spectrum that maybe you'll appreciate is I came out of gymnastics and it was like a very rigorous, like you're going to the Olympics, and I actually really loved climbing because of the freedom. It wasn't like in gymnastics, it's like this is how you do a handstand or a backflip, and there is no right way other than this. Like this is the box. You must do it like this, otherwise you're wrong. And I just remember, actually love gymnastics, but I remember the freedom I felt to just there was no wrong, there was getting to the top, and however I did
mm-hmm,
it was the right way. And so it's been a little bit both strange and cool to see it be in the Olympics, because there's something that I'm like, wow, this this sport that I just thought was just a underground whatever sport became so popular. But I also wonder if there is some loss of that kind of deep creativity or freedom that maybe I first fell in love with. But I don't want to say that's wrong, because I like I can't fault people
mm-hmm,
for the rigor that they put in, and those athletes are incredible, man. They are, to say they're
mm-hmm.
not climbers or not good climbers is wrong.
No, it's amazing. But yeah, it's definitely different than like what you're saying. The same for me. That's why I got into climbing because it wasn't an organized sport, I was doing a lot of the learning on my own or through like a mentor, or I was reading books or I was checking out videos, and it was kind of like there wasn't that much information, so it was kind of cool there, like, oh, like what's this all about? Um, Nowadays it's everywhere, like YouTube, Instagram, it's just like vomiting climbing out like constantly. Um, and so I always ask myself, would I be interested in climbing if I saw climbing nowadays? Like, I don't know. Because I definitely, like, my first interaction with climbing was I got this book. I was pretty young and I saw this book at a bookstore, and it was like called, rock climbing, whatever, rock climbing basics or something like that. Or, and I was just like, wow, what is this? Like, I want to learn about this, like it just seems so foreign, and like no one did it at all. Like, you couldn't really find any information. Um, and that's what was intriguing. I was like, wow, this is like really interesting. And it is so basic, like I was always climbing trees as a kid, like always wanting to climb up buildings if I could, so it just made sense. I was like, oh wow, this is like something that I should be doing.
Mm, yeah. Well, and it definitely stuck with you, and now you have really carved out an entire life around climbing, and you've landed in Waco. You said you've been there for the last 5 or 6 years. Well, in El Paso, which is the city near Waco,
Hmm.
and uh, I know Waco is special, but I'm just kind of curious what made you really decide to call that place your home, at least for the last half decade, because that's a big commitment, and I know it's a big area, but there's a lot of great climbing out there. What's so special about Waco to you?
Yeah, it's crazy. There is a lot of good climbing out there. There's actually too much good climbing out there. Um,
Oh, that's tough. That's too
so
bad. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's like a good problem. But yeah, there's like just so much that's good out there. And I don't know, I started coming to Waco early on in like maybe 96, was something like that was my first trip. Um,
Wow, that's early.
yeah, and it was because I had seen the Fred Nicole, like Masters of Stone, like doing Martini right, and I was just like, oh my God, this is like, first of all, it looks impossible. I've never seen any climbing like that on like such steep terrain with such small holds. It was like, like growing up trad climbing and stuff like that, it was like, wow, this is like, like a totally different level of climbing. Um, so I was always drawn to it, and then I just kept coming back and staying longer and longer. Um, I just love that everything's so steep. It's like even the V2s, you'll have a V2 that's like a roof. Um, it's it's pretty good because like a lot of climbing's pretty fingery, so I feel like in Waco, like you can climb a lot and use your bigger muscles more, and not be tweaking the fingers, although there's tons of crimpy stuff here too. um but I think the thing that draws me most is just it seems like there's so much more to do. Like, there's just so much rock, so much hidden rock, there's so many little corridors. Like, every time I go out, I could see something new, like I'll be in an area where I've been many times and be like, oh, let's go up the hill a bit, and there's like a whole nother little zone up there. um and it's like, yeah, it's overwhelming. Like, I just take photos and I have like everything kind of cataloged in my computer. um Also, slowly working on a guidebook for the backcountry at some point, no hurry, but just trying to keep everything organized. And I have like so many photos of just rock that I've seen that I'm just like, wow, this could be climbed, it looks amazing. um and I mean, who knows how long that I'll be here, so I'm just trying to get as much done as possible, while I'm here.
What do you think about the whole restrictions? And for those not familiar who haven't been to Waco, I mean, maybe I shouldn't describe it because it's been a while since I've been there. But basically, you
Hmm.
have to have a pass, and they it costs a couple of bucks, or you need a guide for the backcountry, as you're saying. How I remember it is North Mountain lets a certain amount of people in a day, and you can roam freely on North Mountain. But other than that, you need a guide, and those are often booked up. And I won't give my opinion, but I'm just kind of curious. Yeah, what do you think about that style?
I like it just because I've seen what it has preserved at Waco. Um, every time I see one of those climbing photos or videos where there's like 20 people at one boulder, I have like a panic attack. I'm like, that would be like the worst place for me to want to go and try and climb something, you know. Um, so yeah, I think it's awesome, and it's not just because of the climbing. Like the reason is because there's a lot of artifacts. It's like the highest concentration of painted masks in North America. So there's like really nice like rock art like that you can see there too, and sometimes that interferes with the climbing. Um, but yeah, it just keeps the numbers down. Like you only can have like I guess 10 people on a tour. Um, so you're never really like around a ton of people. I mean the busy season, yes, it can get kind of crazy. Um, but in general, I don't think they're asking a lot for what like we're all getting out of it. And like if you're really passionate about Waco, like it's really easy to figure out the scenario and get climbing. There's a lot of options to get climbing, but I think that's why a lot of people also avoid it because they're like, oh, I don't want to deal with all the rules. I'll just go to Bishop or Red Rocks or wherever. Um, So yeah, I can understand both sides. It's definitely a pain for someone who's never been there, and they're just like, oh wow, this is so strange.
Yeah, I personally like it, and I think it may be a model that may get followed in the future by some areas because having some money to put towards upkeep of trails, cleanups, and it's just the reality is people value things more when they have to pay money, even if it's like $1. It's just free somehow sets off something in our head that like we don't care about it, and I think there's a extra level of respect, and I guess also just that little bit extra friction shows that you care. It's like, no, I waited in line, or I sat through that freaking video to get my little card. I can yeah, hopefully if you know,
Hmm.
you know. And so I'm actually not that against it, but I mean, yeah, I can see both sides, but I was just kind of curious as someone who has been there a lot. Well, can I ask you, since you literally wrote the book on it, do you have like a favorite easy, moderate, and hard climb in Waco? And I don't really care about the grades, just those big categories as kind of must
Hmm.
do problems in the area.
Wow. Like in the whole
There's only a
park,
few
anywhere in
climbs
the
there.
park. Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
anywhere in the park. But if you want to give me more than one of each, you can just start spitting them out because damn, there's some good ones out there.
yeah. Oh my God, I can't even think. There's so many. Um,
Well,
one of the ones that I've been most psyched on recently is this problem wormwood that I put up that's relatively new, but it's like this really nice tufa. Um, that one is
you sent
just
me a picture of that,
amazing.
huh?
Yes, I think I did. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna look it
That
up
one's
now
amazing.
as you keep.
Like, yeah, I think it's like a 9 or something, and it's kind of highballish, so the ground kind of follows up. So it has like just the right amount of spice, but like just the feature is actually insane. And there's a lot of choss in Waco that like a lot of the top outs can be chossy, and it's really nice when like you find like a really solid boulder.
Geez, that's
Let me
gorgeous. Yeah, I
see.
just looked at the picture. I'll put
Yeah,
that somewhere on Instagram or something. That's yeah, I can see
yeah.
why that makes the list.
I love all the stuff up at the aircraft carrier on East Mountain. Like the fin is a classic V4 there that's just amazing. I just like that setting up there. It's like this huge cave that's kind of like looks like it shouldn't be there. It's a little longer than it should be. It looks kind of like it's just floating. Um, yeah, I don't know. On North Mountain, I really like this highball I put up called To Die For, which is by Ghetto Simulator. Um, Same kind of thing. It has these really nice sculpted rock. And that it's actually the one that's on the cover of the guidebook. There's a
Cool.
photo on the cover that's of that. I think actually I sent it to you, maybe, maybe not. But there's just so much. Um, yeah.
To too tricky. Well, if any more come to mind as I ask you the next question about Hueco, feel free to spit them out. I'm going to give my vote for the French tickler. I don't
Mm,
really, it's like a 9. I also had a pretty cool experience on it where I mean, maybe the setting of being in that, I don't want to call it cave, but it's a pretty big open kind of cave. But I just thought the climbing on that was beautiful. And
mm-hmm.
it's just cool. It's just got that perfect rail.
Yeah.
Well, what about the best place to eat? Any what do you do after a tough day? Do you have any special place to go? El Paso has good food, but it's maybe not known for some kind of specific thing.
Um, yeah, not so much. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, where can I get the best tacos in El Paso? I'm like, I have no clue. If you search it online, I think it brings up Taco Bell as the best Mexican food in El
Oh
Paso.
no! Oh, that's
But there's
terrible.
a no, there's a ton of good stuff. I just don't eat out that much, but I will give a shout out to there's this tiny little hole in the wall Mexican restaurant that I go to breakfast in the mornings on the way to Waco sometimes. It's called Ensenada, and it's like a mile from the Vista, heading towards town on the right side if you're familiar. But just little places like that, that are kind of like locals only. Yeah, I like stuff like that. But I mean, there's tons of good food here now, especially downtown and like on the west side. Um, but yeah, I like those little like hole in the wall mom and pop Mexican places.
Yeah, I'll give my shout out. You said I heard you say Vista Mercado, and that's why I remember is just
Mm,
getting fresh tortillas from there. Maybe not the best way to yeah, stay healthy, but I would just eat way too many of those tortillas hot off the press.
mm-hmm.
uh, okay, well, those are my big topics. I'd love to kind of do some quick hits, some listener and friend questions. But did you by any chance prepare a pro tip for us, Jason, to share some
Oh
of
yes,
your decades of experience?
yes,
Any little encapsulated wisdom?
I do.
Yeah,
I
hit
have a
us
I
with
have
it.
a great pro
Awesome,
tip.
man.
Okay, so my pro tip is I don't know, it's nothing that is I don't know super obvious, but like when you're climbing or you take a couple of rest days and the next day you go out, like and I used to do this a lot of times before a competition. I would take like 3 rest days and do the competition. That feeling, like that you just don't feel like your blood is flowing through your arms, like you feel like you're getting flash pumped, you don't feel like you're warming up. um my pro tip is I love to climb the day before. Easy climbing. I love to go out and do like a bunch of easy high balls or whatever the day before my project. Maybe I rested like 2 days or whatever, but that day before, I love to go out and just get the blood flowing. And I feel so much better the next day, which is kind of strange because, you go to sleep, a lot happens in that time before you go the next day and try the project. But like, I always feel like so like loose, but like kind of springy. Less, I need to warm up a little less. I don't feel like the blood's getting trapped in my arms. um, and so yeah, that's just something that I kind of discovered over time that I was like, oh wow, I feel really good if I do that, before a serious
Mm.
climbing day.
Yeah, if I take too much time off, I just feel awkward. I don't feel smooth, and I think that's a really good tip. It also just kind of shows how important technique is and flowing. It's not just about recovering your muscles; it's about being in touch with movement. And when you get too far away from that, you're losing something. So just having your biceps be back to 100% strength isn't the same as being at your best. And so I think that's a cool tip. I know I know what you're saying. I avoid, sometimes I just try not to take too much time off, and I'll do those kind of more mellow days, because yeah, if I get too far away from climbing, I feel awkward. Good pro tip, man.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Okay, we kind of we touched on this a little bit, but I just kind of want to grab it together, and I can help sum it up. But one of our themes is this good to great. And you may not talk a lot about the grades you have sent, uh, but again, the truth is, man, you have sent some of the hardest climbs out there, especially in the time. When you did the fly, when you bouldered the fly, I remember that. That was a big freaking deal. I mean, it would have been a big deal if you
Right.
had just done it, on a rope. Like, who, great, cool.
Hmm.
That was maybe the hardest, or vying for the hardest climb in America at the time, and you freaking bouldered it. And we were like, oh, okay. So
Right.
if you had to help someone tap into that next level, they've been climbing for a long time. They're not just sticking around. They're psyched and they're putting their all into it. What do you think helped catapult you from good to great, or what would you recommend to someone who's on that precipice where they're really starting to break into their potential?
Um, I think, like I was saying before, just about being obsessed and like finding good projects, like what's the reason you want to do this climb? Because your next level is V11, you want to do a V11. Um, like I think when you're inspired by more than just the number, like I think it's easier to succeed because you're just like, oh wow, this you fall in love with the process and you love going there and failing, even though you're wanting to do it, but you're so psyched on the process that you're like, okay, this is gonna get me there. But yeah, just like devoting, like you'd be like, okay, this is what I want to do. Um, and being focused, I think a lot of times in climbing, it's easy just to go out and be like, oh, I'll just do whatever today, like, yeah, let's go out and have fun, which is also great. But if you're wanting to succeed and you're wanting to get things done, I think you have to be a little more focused and make the right decisions and, um, yeah, go about it in the right way. Like, I'm sure there's definitely a lot of trips people have been on where they could have sent, but they didn't. Um, so I don't know. I think just being serious about it and like, having a good reason to like want to do something.
I love that question of asking yourself, why do you want to do this? What is it really about? And finding that inspiration to pull you to greatness versus not, if you're rudderless and you're just kind of cruising along, it's really hard to find your all. And I love that. I think that's at the core of greatness. And yeah, obsession is interesting. It actually reminds me of a question that we got from a listener, Pedro. Uh, and I actually meant to ask this earlier when you talked about pitching a tent outside of the fly, but I think it fits in right here as well. Is what do you do, or do you have a fear of failure? Has it ever held you back? And Pedro went on to say that, and if it doesn't, what do you credit that to? And you can see how this is linked into what you're talking about, obsession. Something that's really cool about you, Jason, is that you really do hang it out there. You're willing to yell. You're willing to say, "I'm going to set my tent up." But have you ever encountered that fear of failure? And if so, how'd you push through it? And if you didn't, well, I'm jealous, and maybe you have some insights into how you're less sensitive to that fear.
No, I definitely have a lot of fear of failure for sure. Especially like on stuff that I haven't done, like your nemesis projects or whatever, like stuff that you can do but you haven't done. I think it's really easy to get fear built up about something like that. Um, but I find I think about fear less when I'm doing first ascents, fear of failure, when I'm doing first ascents because I don't even know if it's possible. No one has done it. So I go there with an open mind thinking like, let's see how we can do it. Let's figure out a way to do it. Um, and I'm not like, oh, I should be able to do this because it's 512 or whatever grade. Um, the main motivation is seeing if it's doable. So it doesn't matter if you fail, and I think you try harder when you think like that. And a lot of times I'll throw myself in a move like for days and not do it just because I know if I keep coming, I'll eventually do it. Um, but yeah, I think it's easier to feel that fear of failure when you know you should be able to do it and you're not doing it. Um, So yeah, it's tricky. And then I guess just picking your battles, like if you know you can't do something, maybe it's smarter that you don't put so much time into it and move on and find yourself a better project.
That's cool, man. That pressure when you know you can send something, but you actually have to do it. I think I think that's a big deal in climbing, and you can make some analogy for life. And I often I talked about this with Carlo because Carlo Traversi had a video where he was in Switzerland, and he kind of talked about this where he pointed out that there were people just as strong as him that could do boulders, but then actually getting it done and finding that ability to execute in that moment is kind of what it's all about. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know, it just resonates with me, and I like hearing that we're not all alone in the fear of failure. And I would just say that one of the ways that I can hear you getting past it is committing, is saying like I'm going to stay here and do this. And I just think that fear of failure may always be present, but there's something to just planting your flag in the ground and saying, I want to do this. I'm gonna do my best. And I would argue that if you really give something your all, really, commit to it, and you don't come away with success, I don't think you feel that bad. Failing, maybe it's the fear of failure is worse than failure. That I feel like that's an important thing to call out, is
Hmm.
just committing and seeing what actually happens versus being scared of what could happen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's especially when you're on a highball, that's something that you can't think about. Like you put it out of your mind. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many aspects of climbing. It's crazy.
Well, this is kind of why I like highballing. Is when we talk about fear of failure, often what it is like you're trying hard, but you're not really trying your hardest. And it's that whole tying into that yelling and really hanging it out there. And I find that uh, some of my best climbing I've done where when I'm scared and I'm not climbing V12 hard. I am just doing literally the best I can do in that moment. And I don't know what that means. It's just it brings it out of me. And I actually had a one of the reasons why I love evolution is because I had a moment on there that kind of shook me. And from the ground, I'm sure it looked as if I just was climbing beautifully, but that's because
Mm.
it pulled something out of me that I did climb beautifully because that was everything I had in that particular moment. And yeah, that's a good reason to get a little scared. I think, is it brings you,
Yeah,
it,
that's the
you
magic.
confront that fear. Mm. Mm.
Yeah, that's the magic. When you push past that and you break through, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, there's something special there, and I can see it in your resume that you are a pioneer of that world. So, um, Jason, is there anything we didn't cover that you thought would have been a fun topic to hit on before we sign off?
I don't think so. I mean,
Let me see
no.
if there was any climbs. Oh, I kind of want to hear about. Sorry, we don't have to spend too long on it. I just I, I feel like Rules of Chaos and 2 Days with Gene are these incredible climbs that never get talked about. What do you think of Rules of Chaos? Which maybe you can describe it. I just remember walking by, or maybe I saw the video of you on it, and it's one of those climbs that
Hmm.
I have on my like to do list. Are those some of the special climbs in Hueco that you have good memories of doing? Am I on track with how cool those climbs are?
Yeah, for sure. Sadly, Rules of Chaos is closed. Um, so that
Oh,
won't be getting done. But yeah, that was just another one. There was a bunch of climbs that were on the base of this boulder, and it's called the bomb boulder because it's like this huge, like, thing sitting there in the desert. And I was just like, wow, we need to go up the head wall. Like it just looks amazing. Um, and I actually fell off the lip of that and missed all the pads, which
oh my
is
God.
I don't know, that I feel like that usually happens to me. I usually fall off the last move and like somehow land okay and then end up doing it after that. But yeah, I ended up like hitting the lip and my hand blew off and I went over top of the spotters and like missed all the pads and just landed on bare rock. And it's, if you look at it, it's pretty tall. It's probably like, I don't know, close to 20 feet or something. But that was definitely a good experience, like surviving something like that and then like still doing
Surviving
it.
it was the good experience was surviving it. Yeah. Have you ever had a serious injury from climbing, I should
Um,
say?
yeah, I injured my ACL in a bouldering competition at one of the PCA bouldering competitions. I like jumped down kind of wildly, like I was like kind of celebrating. I jumped down from the top of the wall, but I landed on two different size pads. Like there was like a stair step, and it just flew my leg out. And then
Damn. Sorry.
then I re-injured it and had another surgery. So I had two surgeries on the same knee for ACL. It's been a while now, so everything's fine. But yeah, I definitely that's when I did all the training. I did a lot of finger training, um,
Hmm.
and it really helped. Like, um, and I was doing kind of a different style. Like, a lot of people do these like they just hang on bad holds, you know. But like, I was like, instead of timing myself, I would judge it by how many pull-ups I could do on the hold. So I had this really like heinous wooden board that I made that had just like the worst crimps, the worst pinches. I mean, some of the stuff I could barely do one pull up on, and like by the end of like the weeks, I was doing like five pull ups on stuff, and like I was also like writing it all down, which was super important that you can see that progression because each time you go back to try it, you like want to best your last amount. So you're like, okay, I can beat 8, and it was cool. I was like probably that was probably the strongest fingers that I had, and I think that was after that is when I did the fly.
Hmm. Oh wow, you did the fly after hurting yourself seriously.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Well,
Okay, so you
actually,
still
no,
that injury didn't slow you down.
no. I think actually I didn't have an ACL when I was doing the fly.
Oh
Basically,
god, man.
I ripped my ACL and I kept re-injuring it because I didn't want to get surgery, and it was okay, like as long as you can land with your knees bent, it's fine. It's not an issue. But yeah, I think I didn't have an ACL when I did the fly actually.
Okay, first non ACL ascent as well
Yeah.
as first bouldering ascent. Um, actually, yeah. One question is you've traveled a lot, you've climbed a lot of sweet climbs. Is there any established climb that's still on your bucket list? Is like I gotta do this boulder. Like I really want to do this boulder before I die.
Um, yes and no. Yeah, for sure. Like there's stuff in Hueco that I haven't done, like slash face, for instance, that I would love to do. Um,
That's a pretty one. Mm.
yeah, and like, part of me thinks I'm like, oh, I need to do this stuff at some point because once you get to be a certain age, you're probably not going to be able to do it. Um, but it hasn't hit me to where I'm like, okay, I need to go there and like do it. Um, but I would love to do some stuff for sure. I'm just so distracted with all the first ascents that it's like hard to stop doing that and take time off from that and just focus on, uh, trying a hard project.
Man, slash face is pretty though. I've never tried it, but
Yeah.
walking by it, I was like, ooh. And to be honest, my aesthetic doesn't love kind of traversing. I don't know for whatever reason. It's kind of like that same thing where I want someone to walk up to a wall. Maybe they're not even a climber, and they like that's kind of my definition of a really cool line. Is if I took my mom and put
Mm.
her under evolution, she'd be like, oh, this is a big rock. It's cool. Like this is cool, you know? And so, but slash face
Totally.
just has a look to it that when you walk by it, you're kind of like, oh, I'd like to climb on that one. So
Yeah.
good one, man. All right. Well, I'll ask you to plug where people can go and find more about you. I know that you're shaping for So Ill, and so anytime you guys see a So Ill shape, that's Jason. He talked about some of those walls that he's designed, and I really like that highlight reel that you sent me. So I'll plug that into the show notes if you're okay with
Oh, nice.
that. And YouTube, real climbing, is the series that's going on right now, but maybe you could share with us your actual YouTube channel name, your website name, your Instagram name, and just anywhere else people can find all the art you're creating.
Sure. The YouTube is Jason Kehl Crypto Child, and my website is cryptochild.com also, and kind of out of date, but there's definitely some photos on there from the past people can check out. Yeah, and so have all my holds. Instagram, similar, Jason Kehl Crypto Child is my handle, and I mean you can pretty much see everything I'm doing on there. Um, yeah.
Thanks, Jason. I'll just repeat again what I said at the intro. It's wild how many climbers you have impacted. It just really hit me when I was looking at the notes. I was like, geez, tons of FAs, tons of gym design, tons of holds. Really, and you've set a lot of boulders too indoors. So thanks for making such a big impact on climbing. And I like that, especially with you. It's going to be fun to see what's next, because it doesn't sound like you're slowing down with your creative ideas. And anyone who's seen your media is not surprised to hear that you're creative. And it just blows me away how creative you are in every facet of your life, from your Vans, your haircut, the media you put out. Like, I don't know. As a fellow creator, I appreciate seeing someone put out content and live out loud and be yourself. And, thanks for doing it. Thanks for not being boring. And thanks for all the climbing you made for all of us here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot. You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Take care, man.
Yeah, good talking to you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.